Welcome to the podcast. If you'd like to listen to an ad-free version of this episode and all of our episodes, then search True Crime Today Premium Plus on Apple Podcasts and press subscribe. That's our premium channel where all of our ad-free and advanced episodes live, all in one place. True Crime Today Premium Plus. Search it on Apple Podcasts and press subscribe. Even try it for 3 days free.
You're about to take a deep dive into one of the biggest true crime cases in the universe. Or, at least, on our part of the planet. From the Hidden Killers podcast and True Crime Today.
Hey there. Welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be wading into a story that, well, frankly, proves that truth can be stranger than fiction.
Yeah.
We're talking about Sean Diddy Combs.
Right.
The guy who, built this whole empire on music, fashion, you name it.
It's true. Yeah. He's been at the top of the world.
But lately, his life has taken a pretty dark turn.
Yeah, it's a stark reminder that, public image and reality don't always line up.
Yeah.
Diddy, he cultivated this persona of success and charisma, and now over 100 accusations of sexual abuse and exploitation have cast a very long shadow.
Over 100 accusations, ranging from sex trafficking to racketeering.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot to even wrap your head around, right?
Absolutely.
And of course, his lawyers, they deny everything.
Yeah.
But what makes this deep dive so fascinating is the human element of it all.
Right.
Specifically, the response of Diddy's mother, Janice Small Combs.
Yeah, I mean, it's understandable, I think, for any mother to defend her child, especially when you're talking about accusations this serious. But Janice's response, it really delves into a complex psychological space.
Yeah, you got that right.
Yeah.
She released a public statement, and let me tell you, is a lot to unpack.
Okay.
She starts by expressing just, her devastation, calling these allegations outright lies, even going so far as to compare the situation to a public lynching.
Wow.
So very, very strong words.
That's a powerful language, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely.
It suggests just this profound sense of injustice.
Yeah.
Almost like a visceral reaction to protect her son. But it also, I think, highlights how difficult it can be to remain objective when someone you love is accused of something this horrific. I mean, think about it. It's like finding out that, your favorite charity was involved in fraud.
Right.
The shock can make it hard to accept.
Exactly. And this isn't, just about Diddy's career at this point.
Right.
This is about potentially decades of hidden behavior.
Yeah.
For Janice to even begin to accept these accusations, she'd have to grapple with the possibility that she didn't truly know her own son.
That's exactly it. And that's where this concept of cognitive dissonance comes into play.
Okay.
It's a psychological term for the mental discomfort we experience when we hold two conflicting beliefs.
Okay.
And in this case, it's the conflict between the loving mother's image of her son and the horrific acts that he's being accused of.
Right. So you're holding these two completely opposite ideas in your head at the same time.
Exactly. And it creates this incredible tension.
Okay. So let's dive into the specifics of her statement a little bit.
Okay.
Because there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
She acknowledges that Diddy isn't perfect, that he's made mistakes.
Right.
And here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
She brings up the 2016 incident where he was caught on video physically assaulting his then girlfriend, Cassie Ventura.
Right.
So this was, a very public incident.
Yeah. And, this is almost a textbook example of minimizing behavior.
Okay.
Which is a common defense mechanism when you're trying to protect someone.
Right.
So she acknowledges the assault happened, but frames it as a mistake, separate from these far more serious allegations.
Right.
It's almost as if she's compartmentalizing this, creating a separate box for this incident so that she can maintain her preferred narrative about her son.
Right. So she's kind of saying, yeah, okay, that happened, but it's completely separate from all of this.
Exactly.
Okay.
It doesn't really fit with the rest of the picture.
Right. And speaking of narratives, she also talks about how Diddy's decision to settle Cassie's lawsuit out of court was misconstrued.
Okay.
She sees it not as an admission of guilt, but as a strategic legal decision.
Right. So it's interesting how this kind of fits into a larger pattern that we often see of minimizing or explaining away behavior that most people would consider unacceptable.
Right.
And this often involves what we call enablers. These are the people who unintentionally contribute to someone's behavior by downplaying or excusing their actions.
So you're not saying that Janice is intentionally enabling harmful behavior?
No, not at all.
Okay.
It's much more nuanced than that.
Right.
But being surrounded by people who consistently minimize your actions can create this feedback loop where there's very little incentive to change.
Right. It just reinforces that behavior over and over again.
Precisely. It becomes a cycle of action, minimal consequences, reassurance, and then repetition.
And that brings us to, I think, the core issue here.
Yeah.
Over 120 accusers.
It's a staggering number.
Including a 9-year-old boy alleging these horrific experiences.
Yeah.
Sexual exploitation, manipulation, even sex trafficking.
It's really heavy stuff.
Yet Janice remains steadfast.
Wow.
These are lies, she argues, driven by greed. And her son deserves his day in court.
Which of course he does.
Of course.
Everyone is entitled to due process.
Absolutely.
But it begs the question.
Yeah.
Can a mother's love, as powerful and instinctual as it is, create a blind spot?
Right.
Blind spot so profound that it becomes almost impossible to reconcile these accusations with the image she holds of her son.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it, about the stories we tell ourselves.
It does.
The narratives we cling to make sense of a world that often feels so chaotic and unpredictable.
Yeah, it speaks to, I think, a fundamental aspect of human psychology. We all engage in cognitive bias to some degree.
Right.
You know, favoring information that confirms our existing beliefs while dismissing anything that challenges them.
Yeah, it's easier to believe what you already think is true.
It's how we make sense of the world, but it can also lead us astray.
Which is where critical thinking comes in.
Exactly.
Right.
Being able to kind of step back from a situation, examine the evidence from multiple perspectives, and challenge our own assumptions.
So how does this case, with its layers of, accusation denial and family loyalty, how does this reflect the realities of the music industry?
That's a great question.
Because let's face it, this isn't the first time we've seen these kinds of allegations surface in that world.
Not at all. This is sadly a recurring theme.
Right. And I think we have to acknowledge that
Absolutely.
Diddy's rise to fame coincided with a time when certain behaviors within the music industry were sadly overlooked or even sometimes celebrated.
Yeah. It was a different time with different standards.
Right. And it feels like sometimes those lines just came completely blurred.
They did. And I think power dynamics played a huge role in that.
Absolutely.
Celebrity culture often shielded certain behaviors.
Right.
And the allure of fame and fortune. I mean, that created a system that was ripe for exploitation.
It's true. And it's a system that often rewards ambition.
Yes.
And turns a blind eye to the cost.
Absolutely.
And I don't want to say that everyone in the music industry is complicit or anything like that.
No, of course not.
But you can't deny that the environment can be very conducive to this kind of alleged behavior.
It can be. And that's why I think it's so important to talk about these issues openly and honestly, because real change can only happen when we shine a light on these dark corners.
It's about time we shift the narrative, don't you think?
I think so.
So where do we go from here?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it?
We have Diddy facing this mountain of accusations, maintaining his innocence.
Yeah.
We have his mother, Janice, unwavering in her belief that he is the victim of a smear campaign.
It's a really complicated situation.
It is. And we have a public that's grappling with this really complex case.
Yeah.
Trying to sift through all the noise and all the chaos and form their own conclusions.
And that's what we're trying to do here.
Exactly. And as this case moves forward, as more evidence is presented and testimonies are heard, it's so vital for us as engaged citizens to approach this information with a critical eye.
I completely agree.
It's about resisting that urge to jump to conclusions, to be swayed by emotion or preconceived notions.
Absolutely. We have to be careful about that.
Instead, we need to analyze the evidence.
Yes.
Listen to all sides and be open to the possibility that the truth might be more complicated than we initially thought.
It often is.
It really is.
Yeah.
And that's what this deep dive is all about, right?
I think so.
It's about giving you the tools and information you need to engage in these difficult conversations.
Right.
And form your own informed opinions.
It's about fostering a space for critical thinking.
Right.
For acknowledging the complexities of human behavior.
Yeah.
And understanding that sometimes the most challenging truths are the ones that we have to confront within ourselves.
You said it. So as we wrap up our dive into this evolving story, we're left with this question.
Yeah. What's the question?
How do we reconcile the love and loyalty we have for our own family and friends with the possibility that they might be capable of actions we find morally reprehensible?
That's a tough one.
It's a question that cuts to the core of human relationships, I think.
It does. And there's no easy answer to that.
No.
There's no one-size-fits-all response.
Right.
But what we can do as individuals is approach these situations with open minds.
Yes.
And a willingness to examine our own biases.
It's about accepting that sometimes the people we love are capable of hurting others.
It is.
Even if it's incredibly difficult to comprehend.
Right.
And that doesn't diminish our love for them.
No.
But it does require us to hold space for both of those things to be true at the same time.
It's a very nuanced dance between empathy and accountability.
Right.
We can empathize with the pain and confusion that Janice Combs is experiencing, the instinctive need to defend her son,
Right.
while also acknowledging the gravity of the accusations against him.
And that's where this case, as it moves through the legal system, becomes this really, I think, powerful microcosm of a much larger conversation that we're having in society.
Absolutely.
It forces us to ask ourselves, how do we balance the presumption of innocence with the weight of serious accusations?
Yeah, because that is a fundamental tenet of our justice system.
It is.
But it's not always easy to navigate in practice.
Right.
We have to be cautious about rushing to judgment, about letting our emotions dictate our perceptions, while also creating space for victims to feel heard and believed.
It's about finding that delicate balance. It is.
Right.
Yeah.
And recognizing that the truth often lies somewhere in the gray areas.
It does.
Not in the extremes.
Right. We tend to want to simplify things.
We do.
To make them easier to process.
Right.
But the reality is, human behavior is far more nuanced than that.
And as this case continues to unfold, it's a reminder that our job as engaged citizens is to stay informed, to engage in thoughtful dialogue, and to approach these challenging situations with empathy, critical thinking, and a commitment to seeking justice for all involved.
Couldn't said it better myself.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we encourage you to continue exploring these questions.
Right.
To engage in conversations with friends, family, colleagues.
Yeah, have those tough conversations.
Yeah.
Because it's through these dialogues, through sharing perspectives and listening with open minds, that we can begin to grapple with these complex issues.
That's how we grow.
Absolutely. And create a more just and equitable world.
And remember, there's always more to learn, more to understand.
That's right.
So stay curious, stay engaged, and keep asking those tough questions.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
Until next time, stay curious out there. It's a tough question to wrestle with, right?
Yeah.
How much of our judgment is clouded by, love, loyalty?
Right.
Maybe even our own need to believe the best about people.
Yeah.
Especially the people that are closest to us.
It's a universal struggle, I think.
Yeah.
But before we get too deep into the psychology of it all, maybe we should shift gears a little bit and take a closer look at the accusations themselves.
Okay.
You've gathered quite a bit of information on this.
I have, yeah. And I think one of the things that's most striking is the sheer number of accusers.
Right.
We're talking over 120 individuals.
Yeah, men and women.
Men and women.
All alleging this pattern of abuse.
Right. And it's not just the quantity.
Yeah.
But the consistency across these accounts.
Absolutely.
That's incredibly compelling.
I mean, so many of these accusers describe very, very similar experiences.
Right.
Manipulation, coercion, often involving promises of career advancement.
Right.
In the music industry.
Exploiting dreams and aspirations. I mean, it's heartbreaking to think about.
It is.
And we can't ignore the fact that some of these accusations involve minors.
That's right.
One accuser claims that he was just 9 years old when he was approached with promises of a record deal.
Wow.
Only to be subjected to abuse.
These are incredibly serious allegations.
They are. And it's important to remember that behind every accusation is a real person with a real life that's been impacted by this.
Exactly.
It doesn't mean that we automatically assume guilt.
No, of course not.
But it underscores the importance of treating these claims with the weight that they deserve.
Absolutely.
And it brings us back to Janice's response.
Okay.
Even as these accusations mounted.
Yeah.
Even with the potential severity of them.
Right.
Her belief in her son never wavered.
It's unwavering.
She insists that these individuals are motivated by greed.
Right.
That they're seeking, their own 15 minutes of fame or a big payday.
It goes back to that question of a mother's love, doesn't it?
It does.
I mean, is it possible that her instinct to protect her son has created a blind spot.
Right.
A blind spot so large that she just can't or won't reconcile these accusations with the image that she holds of him.
It really makes you think about the stories we tell ourselves.
It does.
You know, the narratives that we cling to make sense of the world.
To give ourselves a sense of order.
Right, because the world often feels so chaotic and unpredictable.
Right, and that's where critical thinking, I think, becomes so important.
Okay, so how do we do that?
Well, it's about being able to step back.
Okay.
From a situation, examine the evidence.
Right, look at all sides.
From multiple perspectives. And really challenge your own assumptions.
Okay, so how does this case, with all of its layers of, accusation, denial, family loyalty, how does this reflect the realities of the music industry as a whole?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah, because we have to acknowledge that this isn't the first time that we've seen these types of allegations in this world.
It's a recurring theme, unfortunately.
Right, and it feels like Diddy's rise to fame really coincided with a time when certain behaviors were kind of overlooked or even celebrated.
It was a different time with different standards, and those lines often got blurred.
Yeah, they did.
I think power dynamics played a huge role in that. Celebrity culture as well often shielded certain behaviors from scrutiny.
Yeah.
And this allure of fame and fortune, I mean, it created a system that was just ripe for exploitation.
And it's a system that rewards ambition and often turns a blind eye to the cost.
And it's not to say that everyone in the industry is complicit or anything like that.
Right, of course not.
But you can't deny that the environment itself can be conducive to this kind of alleged behavior.
Absolutely, and that's why it's so important for us to have these open and honest conversations.
I agree.
About what's going on.
Because real change can only happen when we shine a light on these dark corners.
It's about time that we shift the narrative, don't you think?
I think so, too.
So where do we go from here?
Well, that's the big question.
We have Diddy facing this mountain of accusations, maintaining his innocence.
Right.
We have his mother, Janice, unwavering in her belief that he's the victim of some kind of smear campaign.
And you have a public that's grappling with this incredibly complex case, trying to sift through all of the noise and form their own conclusions.
Trying to figure out what they believe.
Exactly. And as this case moves forward, as more evidence is presented, and testimonies are heard, it's so important for us as engaged citizens to approach this information with a critical eye.
Yeah.
We can't just jump to conclusions. We can't let our emotions dictate our perceptions.
Right.
But at the same time, we need to create a space for victims to feel heard and believed.
So it's about finding that balance.
It really is.
Right.
Yeah, it's about finding that delicate balance and recognizing that the truth often lies somewhere in the gray areas.
It's not black and white.
Not in the extremes, no.
No, and we as humans, we tend to want to simplify things.
We do. It's easier to process that way.
Right. It's easier to make sense of the world that way.
Exactly. But human behavior is so much more nuanced than that.
It really is. And as this case unfolds, it's a good reminder that our job as engaged citizens is to stay informed, to have these thoughtful dialogues.
Right.
And to approach these challenging situations with empathy, with critical thinking.
Absolutely.
And with a commitment to seeking justice for everyone involved.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
It's a tough question, right?
It is.
How do we reconcile that?
Yeah.
That love and loyalty.
Right.
With the possibility that they might be capable of something that we find morally reprehensible.
Yeah, and I don't think there are any easy answers when it comes to that.
Right.
But I think what we can do as individuals is try to at least approach these situations with open minds and a willingness to examine our own biases.
It's about accepting that sometimes the people we love are capable of hurting other people.
It's true.
Even if it's really hard to wrap our heads around.
It can be incredibly difficult to comprehend.
And that doesn't mean that we love them any less.
No, it doesn't.
But it requires us, I think, to kind of hold space for both of those things to be true.
It's a very nuanced dance.
It is.
Between empathy and accountability.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
You can empathize with someone like Janice Combs.
Right.
With the pain that she's going through.
Right, the confusion.
The need to defend her son.
Right.
But at the same time, you can also acknowledge the very serious nature of the accusations against him.
Absolutely. And I think that's what makes this case, as it moves through the legal system, so fascinating.
Yeah.
Because it becomes this microcosm, of a much larger conversation that we're having as a society.
Absolutely.
About how do we balance the presumption of innocence with the weight of these serious accusations.
Which is, a fundamental tenet of our justice system.
It is.
But, it's not always easy to navigate that in practice.
No, it's not.
Because on the one hand, we have to be so cautious about rushing to judgment.
Right.
About letting our emotions dictate how we view a situation.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, we have to create space
right.
for victims to feel heard, to feel believed.
Right. So it's about finding that balance.
It is.
It's about recognizing that the truth often lies somewhere in the gray area.
Yeah, the in-between spaces.
It's not black and white.
And, we as humans, we like to put things into those neat little categories.
Of course, it's easier to make sense of the world that way.
Right. But the reality is human behavior is far messier than that.
It really is. And I think as this case continues to unfold, it's a good reminder to all of us to stay informed.
Yes. Stay engaged.
Keep having those critical conversations.
Have those tough conversations with the people in your lives.
And to approach these situations with empathy.
Yes.
With critical thinking and with a commitment to seeking justice.
I couldn't agree more.
Well, I think that's a good place to wrap up our deep dive for today.
It is.
As always, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I always enjoy these conversations.
As do I. We'll be back next week with another deep dive into a new and fascinating topic.
Can't wait.
Until then, stay curious out there.
In a world where the darkest secrets lie just beneath the surface.
They said it was an accident, but the evidence says otherwise.
Where hidden killers roam, unnoticed, in the shadows.
I think you would definitely be looking at a blend of toxic, very bad narcissistic personality traits, and they will be vengeful and possibly resort to violence.
Join Tony Bruschi as he uncovers the truth behind the most chilling cases.
They said it was an accident, but the evidence clearly says otherwise.
Each episode, we dig deep into the minds of those who commit the unthinkable.
To your point on narcissism, he thinks in his own mind how witty he is.
Yeah.
But he lost that jury. I was done with him in 2 minutes.
From unsolved mysteries to infamous crimes.
Geez, you've just talked about how you've taught yourself how to do everything under the sun. I bet you did a YouTube video, how to best kill somebody with a knife.
Hidden Killers with Tony Bruschi takes you where few dare to go.
How does someone with such a dark secret go unnoticed for so long?
With multiple new episodes every single day.
We're not just telling stories, we're seeking justice.
Listen now on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Just search for Hidden Killers with Tony Bruschi.